They thought digging a trench around my house would force me to sell. They didn't realize I'd spent years preparing for people exactly like them. When the HOA tried to isolate me, they forgot one thing: every move they made, every word they said. I already had it all on camera. Asterisk, asterisk, when I was 12. My father took me behind the old barn and showed me how to replace a fuel filter on the generator. He said, "Son, this land runs because we know how to keep it running." That line stuck with me. It wasn't just about the generator, it was about life. I grew up on these 12 acres just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. Flat, quiet, and honest. Every fence post, every weathered plank on the porch, every patch of soil, it carried the story of my family's hands. My parents are gone now, but their lessons still echo in everything I do. Especially the one about never letting someone else tell you what your home is worth. I'm 42 now. I still live on that same piece of land. Some folks call it stubborn, others call it outdated. I call it peace. I built my own solar rig, deepened the well, and rebuilt half the porch after a tornado ripped through in 2014. It's not fancy, but it's mine, you see. Out here we don't need much. The sky's wide enough, the air smells like mesquite and rain, and when the lights go out in town, mine stay on. My only neighbors used to be deer, the occasional coyote, and my dog Banjo, a big, lazy mix who thinks he owns the place. That peace lasted for years. But peace never lasts when someone else smells profit. About 4 years ago, developers started moving in on the land west of me. They called it Sunny Hollow Estates, a modern, family-friendly community. What it really was a row of identical houses stacked shoulder to shoulder, all painted shades of beige, run by an HOA that liked to tell grown adults how tall their grass could be. At first I didn't mind. Their fence stopped right at my boundary, and I figured that was that. Let them play suburbia. I had no reason to care. But that's the funny thing about boundaries. People like to test them. I started getting letters, at first polite, almost friendly. "Community notice," they said. "We'd love to discuss future expansion opportunities." Translation: "We want your land." I laughed it off, tossed the envelopes into the fire pit, and went back to working in my shed. But then came the second letter, this one typed, embossed, and serious. It had an offer. $600,000. $600,000 for the soil where my father taught me to work, where my mother planted her rose bushes, where Banjo buried every toy he ever owned. I didn't even make it halfway through the page. I folded the letter, set it on the porch railing, and lit a match. Some things money can't buy, and if it can, it's not worth owning. Still, I could feel something shift in the air after that. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Trucks started appearing near the boundary. Unfamiliar faces, measuring tape, clipboards. One of them waved once. I didn't wave back. I remember standing there, watching the sun dip behind the new houses, their neat lawns glowing like a plastic brochure photo, and I thought, they don't belong here. And then a colder thought followed. Neither do I. Not to them. They looked at my home and saw an obstacle. I looked at their houses and saw strangers trying to erase history. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a polite disagreement. It was going to be a fight, the kind that doesn't make headlines, the kind fought with papers, fences, and quiet threats. I just didn't know yet how deep they were willing to dig, literally. Asterisk. It started with a knock on the gate. Not a hard one, polite, almost rehearsed, like the kind you'd hear before a sales pitch. I was out by the south pasture fixing a section of fence when I looked up and saw a spotless white SUV parked by the gravel road. Out stepped a woman in a pale blue pantsuit that probably cost more than my truck. Clipboard in hand, smile so wide it looked painted on. "Mr. Reed?" She called out, voice bright but sharp underneath. "That's me," I said, keeping my gloves on and my distance. "I'm Karen Martell, president of the Sunny Hollow Homeowners Association." She said it like it was supposed to mean something. I nodded slowly. "We've sent you a few letters," she added, tilting her head just enough to imply she already knew I'd ignored them. "Yeah," I said. And I burned him. That wiped the shine off her smile for half a second, but she recovered fast. "Well," she said, clasping her hands, "we're looking to expand the community, and your land happens to be in a rather strategic position. It would really benefit everyone if we came to an agreement." I leaned on the fence. "Everyone but me." Her eyes flicked up, the kind of look people give when they realize you're not playing the part they expected. She started talking again about shared values, modern amenities, community vision. Every word sounded like it had been tested in a boardroom and printed on a brochure. I let her talk. I wanted to see how far she'd go. Finally, when she paused for breath, I said, "Not interested." Her smile didn't move, but something in her eyes did. A flicker, like a shadow cutting through sunlight. "I understand sentimental value," she said sweetly. "But sometimes holding on too tightly can prevent progress." I pointed toward the open field behind me. "That's my progress." She looked, but I could tell she didn't see it. Not the cottonwoods, not the fence line, not the work. All she saw was square footage and market value. "Well, Mr. Reed," she said, reaching into her folder, "just in case you change your mind, here's my card." She placed it carefully on my fence post. Like she was staking a claim, then she turned. Heels clicking on the gravel, and got back into her SUV, drove off slow. Real slow. I stood there long after she was gone, just listening to the sound of the wind through the trees. Banjo came trotting up beside me, head tilted like he knew something wasn't right. "You smell that?" I muttered. "That's trouble wearing perfume." For a few days, nothing happened. I figured I'd shut it down clean. But that's the thing about people like Karen. They don't hear no, they hear try harder. A week later, I noticed a white sedan parked by the property line. Same spot every morning. Didn't move for hours. Just sat there. The next day, 2 men in orange vests were walking the perimeter with clipboards. Muttering and pointing, I walked down to the fence. "You boys lost?" One of them smiled like he'd practiced it. "Surveying the area, sir." "HOA improvements. Improvements to what?" I asked. "Drainage upgrades? Possible fencing adjustments?" With that, the mind with the minimum stab with the wins. He hesitated. "Adjacent properties. Then stay adjacent." They laughed. Not nervously, but arrogantly. The kind of laugh that says, "We've got permission from someone more powerful than you." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling. I stood on my porch with a beer, watching the edge of my land where their headlights had been earlier. The stars were out, the kind of Oklahoma night sky that stretches forever. But something about it felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Even out here in the open, I'd dealt with tornadoes, droughts, wild hogs, even the occasional thief. But I'd never dealt with people who believed a rule book gave them the right to bury another man's life. The next morning, another letter arrived, this time slipped right under my gate. No postage, no return address. Just a typed page with one line bolded at the bottom: "Failure to respond may result in legal action." I didn't even finish reading. I tore it in half and tossed it in the dirt. But my hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. You can fight nature, you can fight storms, but fighting people who hide behind policies and paper, that's a different kind of storm. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. It started small, like most bad things do. A white sedan parked at the far edge of my property again. Same car, same spot. Every morning, it showed up around 9 and didn't move till evening. The first time, I thought maybe it was a realtor or someone lost. By the third day, I knew better. They weren't lost. They were watching. Then came the surveyors. Orange vests, clipboards, and the kind of confidence you only get when you think someone important is backing you up. They walked my fence line like they owned it. One of them even crossed a few feet over the boundary, pretending not to notice. I didn't shout. I just raised my phone, snapped a picture, and let them see me doing it. They left 10 minutes later, heads down, radios crackling. That night, Banjo wouldn't stop pacing the porch. His ears perked, low growl rumbling in his chest. I stepped outside with my flashlight and scanned the tree line. Nothing, just the creak of branches and the hum of cicadas. Still, that feeling lingered, the kind that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. A few days later, a county truck came rumbling up the road. 2 men stepped out, same orange vests. I met them halfway. "You fellas with the county?" I asked. They exchanged a look. "Contracted for infrastructure review," one said. I raised an eyebrow. "Funny, the county usually calls first." He shrugged. "Paperwork's in process." Paperwork. That word made my jaw tighten. It always means something's being decided behind closed doors. When they drove off, I followed their tire tracks. They led straight toward the HOA side of the fence. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the lights from the new neighborhood twinkle in the distance. It used to be quiet out here. Now it looked like a landing strip. I could almost feel the weight of all those eyes, those rules, those meetings about lawn care and mailbox colors. I didn't belong to that world, and I didn't want to, but apparently they wanted me. 2 weeks passed without another visit. I started to think maybe it was over. Then, just before dawn, one Saturday morning, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard since the county widened the highway years ago, the deep, throaty growl of diesel engines. It was close. Too close. I threw on my boots, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside. The air was thick with dust and gasoline. Through the haze, I saw silhouettes, big machines lined along my western fence. A bulldozer, 2 backhoes, a dump truck. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They were moving like clockwork, tearing into the earth in perfect formation. Metal clanked, dirt flew, and the ground shook beneath my feet. Then I saw her, Karen Martell, standing in the middle of it all, in a reflective vest and designer scarf, like some kind of suburban general commanding an army of excavators. She waved when she saw me. "Morning, Mr. Reed." She shouted over the roar of engines. "What the hell is this?" I yelled back. "Routine drainage work," she called, smiling as if she believed it. I looked behind her. The trench they were digging ran deep, 4, maybe 5 feet, starting from the HOA side and curving around my boundary. I followed it with my eyes, realizing it wasn't stopping. It was looping. They were digging around my entire property. "You planning to dig all the way around me?" I asked. Her grin widened, just enough to show teeth. "Well, now that you mention it, yes." The wind caught her hair as the machines rumbled forward, carving deeper, wider. My throat went dry. "You didn't think you needed to ask permission?" I said. "We've checked the plat lines," she replied smoothly. "This trench is entirely within HOA jurisdiction. Maybe you should check your survey maps." Her words were dipped in poison, and she knew it. I clenched my jaw. "Karen, you're encroaching. This is illegal." "Oh, come now, Evan," she said sweetly. "No need for dramatics. Think of it as breathing room. Maybe it'll give you time to reconsider our offer." Just like that, she turned her back and walked away, the dozer still tearing into the soil. I stood there, helpless, furious, dust coating my face. Banjo barked until his voice went hoarse, but the engines drowned him out. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about land anymore. It was about power, about control. They didn't just want my property, they wanted to break me. I went inside, slammed the door, and pulled out my old filing box, the one with my father's deed. The county survey and every legal document, proving this land was mine. My hands were shaking so bad, could barely hold the papers they thought they could. Bury me behind a wall of dirt. What they didn't know was that I was about to dig up something a whole lot deeper, the truth. Asterisk. By the time the sun rose fully that morning, my land looked like a battlefield. The roar of diesel engines drowned out the birds, and red dust floated through the air like smoke from a war zone. From my porch, I could see the machines carving through the ground, relentless, mechanical and deliberate. It wasn't random digging. It was a perimeter, a clean, deliberate line. They were surrounding me. I grabbed my phone and started filming. The backhoe's arms swung wide, crashing into the dirt, throwing clumps of soil into a growing ditch. The trench was already 4 feet deep, stretching along the western edge of my property. The workers didn't look up. They knew I was watching, and they didn't care. Banjo barked until his throat went raw. He hated the sound of engines. I couldn't blame him. I hated the sound of people trying to erase history with steel teeth. Then I saw her again, Karen. Martell, reflective vest, perfectly pressed, hair tied back, clipboard tucked under her arm. She looked like someone inspecting a garden, not supervising a siege. When she noticed my camera, she waved. "Morning again, Mr. Reed," she shouted cheerfully. I stepped closer to the fence. "You think this is legal?" She tilted her head, smile unwavering. "Completely. The HOA has full authorization. Routine soil reinforcement. You'll thank us when the rainy season comes." I stared at her, trying to decide if she actually believed her own nonsense or if she just enjoyed the game. "I already have drainage," I said. "Had it for 20 years. "Well," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard, "now you'll have better drainage. Courtesy of your community." My blood boiled. "I'm not part of your community." She smiled wider. "Not yet." That was it. The mask slipping, just for a second. The smirk beneath the smile. She turned away, calling out to the dozer operator. "A little deeper, please. Let's make sure it holds." The metal claw plunged into the ground again, shaking the fence posts. I backed away, breathing hard. I'd seen a lot in my life. Storms, floods, even a tornado that took half the porch, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt so intentional. By noon, the trench wrapped halfway around my property. It wasn't just deep, it was wide, almost 5 feet across, enough to make crossing it a hazard. The dirt piled high on the HOA side like a wall. They were building a moat, literally and symbolically. I called the sheriff's department. The dispatcher was polite, professional. She asked if there was immediate danger. "Immediate danger?" I repeated, staring at a bulldozer 20 feet from my fence. "Yeah, to my patients." Deputy arrived about 35 minutes later, a young guy named Wilkins. He parked just outside the property and walked up slowly, notebook in hand. "Morning, sir. Got a report about unauthorized digging?" "More like hostile takeover," I said, pointing toward the machines. Karen saw him and came striding over like she'd been expecting him. "Deputy, so good to see you," she said in that fake cheerful tone. "We're conducting scheduled maintenance within HOA jurisdiction." She handed him a laminated sheet, probably one of her permits. He looked it over, then looked at me. "Sir, do you have documentation for your property lines?" "In the house," I said. "Original county deed. Signed by my father and verified last year." He nodded slowly. "We'll have to verify this with the zoning office. For now, no one crosses the boundary into your home lot." "Technically," Karen added. That word made my jaw clench. "Technically." The deputy gave a small, helpless shrug. "We don't make land determinations. That's county survey's job." "I'll file a report." Karen smiled like she'd just won a round. "Thank you, officer. We always appreciate law enforcement cooperation." When he left, she turned to me, leaned slightly against her clipboard, and said, "See? Everything by the book, Evan. Nothing personal." Shoot. She shook her head lightly. "Can't do that. Progress doesn't wait." I didn't say another word. Just watched her walk away, heels crunching in the dirt. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the half-dug trench glowing orange in the sunset. The air smelled like hot dust and diesel. My land, my sanctuary, now looked like a construction site. The next morning, they were back. More machines, more workers, more dirt flying, and this time, they didn't stay on their side. The trench crept past my original fence posts. I could see the tracks from their machines clear as day. Cutting into my soil, they'd parked a dump truck across the one open stretch of road that led to the county highway. My only exit. Deliveries couldn't get through. The mail truck honked twice and turned around. Even the trash collectors called to say they couldn't reach my bins. I was trapped, standing in the middle of my yard. Surrounded by a growing ditch, I realized something. They weren't just trying to pressure me. They were trying to isolate me. I looked at Banjo. He looked back, ears down, tail low. I knelt, rubbed behind his neck. "They think they can dig me in," I muttered. "Let's see how deep they're willing to go." Inside, I pulled open my filing cabinet and spread my paperwork across the kitchen table. Maps, permits, deeds, old photos of the original boundary markers. The evidence was clear. They'd crossed it, but the law moves slow, slower than bulldozers. So I did what any man with a backbone and a lifetime of stubbornness would do. I planned. I wasn't sure how. But I was going to fight back, not with fists or fury, but with proof. Because if Karen Martell thought she could bury me in her trench, she was about to find out that I'd been watching her the whole time. Asterisk, I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. The sound of the machine still echoed in my head, that grinding, tearing rhythm that made my skin crawl. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw dirt piling up like walls. By dawn, I was sitting at my workbench in the shed, sipping cold coffee and staring at the blueprint of my land taped to the wall. I'd spent my life maintaining this place, protecting it from storms, droughts, and time itself. But I'd never imagined I'd have to defend it from neighbors. That's when I remembered something my father told me the year he handed me the keys to the property. "You can't stop every thief, son, but you can make sure they can't lie about what they took." He meant it figuratively back then. But now, I realized it was time to take it literally. A few years back, after a rash of copper thefts in the county, I had installed a network of off-grid surveillance cameras. Not the flashy kind with blinking LEDs or cloud subscriptions, no. These were motion-triggered trail cams, the kind hunters use to track deer. I'd hidden them inside birdhouses, fence posts, and even one inside a fake rock by the well pump. Each one fed wirelessly into a private drive buried under my workshop, solar-powered, offline, and encrypted. Paranoid? Maybe, but in Oklahoma, you learn quick that being prepared isn't crazy, it's survival. I booted up the monitor, punched in my password, and started scrolling through the feeds. At first, nothing, just footage of trees swaying, Banjo chasing a squirrel, the usual. But then I found it. The first clip hit like a gut punch. 2 HOA workers, orange vests, measuring tape, crossing my fence line. One laughs and says, "He'll cave by next week." The timestamp matched the day. Karen told the deputy everything was within jurisdiction. I felt my jaw tighten. Next clip, one of the backhoes crossing clearly onto my side, its treads crushing the grass near my boundary marker. I paused the video, zoomed in. There it was, the original survey stake. My father and I had said it years ago, carved initials still visible. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Then came the gold. A 23-second clip from the camera hidden in the old oak near the well. Karen Martell herself, standing beside a bulldozer, pointing toward my pump controls. Her voice came through, clear as daylight. "Make sure that trench cut's just shy of that pipe. He can't stay here without water. He'll break faster than the zoning board." I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat pounding. She wasn't just trying to pressure me. She was trying to choke me out, literally. For a long moment, I didn't move. Didn't curse. Didn't even breathe. Just stared at that frozen frame, her finger pointing. Her mouth mid-sentence, and felt the anger drain away, replaced by something sharper. Focus. I copied the clips onto a flash drive, time-stamped, labeled backed up to 3 different drives. Then I printed stills, wide shot, close-up property marker and frame. I'd seen enough TV court shows to know how to make evidence stick. By mid-afternoon, I drove to the sheriff's office. The air inside smelled like stale coffee and paperwork. Deputy Wilkins was there, same young guy as before. When he saw me walk in, his shoulders sagged like he already knew. "Mr. Reed," he said, "please tell me they didn't start digging again." I placed the flash drive on the counter. "They didn't just dig, Deputy. They trespassed, vandalized, and threatened my water supply. And I've got every second on camera. He led me into a small conference room. 10 minutes later, supervisor joined us, a big man with a serious face and a nameplate that read, Carter. We watched the footage together in silence. At the part where Karen gave her order, Carter exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw. Jesus, he muttered. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It's compelling, he said, but land disputes are messy. We'll need official surveys to verify the boundaries. Still, this. He tapped the screen. This will make someone sweat. That was all I needed to hear. Before I left, he said, keep documenting everything. Don't engage them directly. We'll file an official complaint today. I nodded, thanked him, and drove home. The sky was turning orange as I pulled into the driveway. Banjo came running up, tail wagging like he hadn't spent 2 days barking at bulldozers. I scratched his ears, looked out at the half-dug trench, and smiled for the first time in days. They thought they could bury me in silence. They forgot silence doesn't last long when you've got proof by nightfall. I'd uploaded the first clip to an unlisted YouTube link and sent it to a few local groups. The title read, HOA digging trench around private property without consent. It was time to let the world see what kind of monsters hide behind pastel fences and fake smiles. And as the upload bar filled, I whispered to myself, asterisk your move, Karen. Asterisk the video went live on a Thursday evening. No fanfare, no hashtags, just a shaky clip of bulldozers cutting into Oklahoma dirt in one HOA. President standing in the middle like she was planting her flag. I posted it under my real name. No gimmicks, no voiceover, just the truth. Within an hour, the first comment appeared. Wait, that's Evan Reed's property. That's not even inside the HOA. Then another. Is this legal? Someone called the news. By the time I finished dinner, the video had crossed 2,000 views. Not viral, not yet, but enough to stir the hornet's nest. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Reporters, bloggers, random strangers asking if they could repost it. I said yes to every single one. The truth doesn't need copyright protection. It needs witnesses. Karen must have seen it because by noon, I got an email from a Sunny Hollow HOA council representative. It was written in legalese so thick it could suffocate you. A CA Sandusist notice, accusing me of defamation, harassment, and misrepresentation of community projects. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. I hit reply and typed one sentence. See you in court? I've got more footage than Netflix. Then I posted that screenshot too. That's when it really blew up. Comments poured in faster than I could read them. HOA turns neighborhood into medieval fortress. Man trapped on his own land minus 2025 edition. She actually said cut his water. That's evil. Even a few ex-HOA members chimed in, admitting they'd left because of Karen's power trips. One wrote, she once fined me for leaving a pumpkin on my porch past November. That one got 40,000 likes. Within 24 hours, my clip had over 300,000 views. Local news stations picked it up. Headlines rolled in, homeowner allegedly trapped by HOA construction, trench war in Tulsa suburb. A reporter from Channel 9 called me personally. She asked if I'd be willing to give a statement on camera. Sure, I said, but you'll have to park a mile away. They've dug me in, she laughed, thought I was joking. She stopped laughing when she saw it in person. That night, they aired the segment. Drone shots of the trench. Clips of Karen's voice from the footage. My quiet face lit by porch light as I said, they wanted to isolate me. I just hit record. It's the closing line from the reporter. Sometimes the best defense is simply the truth and a good camera. The internet loved it. Memes started popping up. Someone drew me as a castle defender holding a camera instead of a sword. Another edited a movie trailer called Trench, The HOA Wars. It was ridiculous and perfect. But under the humor, something real was shifting. Public outrage. Pressure. People were tagging city officials, demanding action. Even the county zoning board released a statement saying they were reviewing the situation. Meanwhile, the HOA panicked. They sent out a community bulletin to all Sunny Hollow residents. Ongoing issue with adjacent property owner. Resident has refused multiple legal requests and is obstructing community safety improvements. Nice try, Karen. The comment section tore that apart within minutes. One neighbor wrote, "I live here. This is not community safety. This is bullying." Another said, "If they can do that to him, what stops them from doing it to us?" And that was it. The tide turned. Karen's perfect image cracked under the weight of her own arrogance. I stood on my porch that night, banjo at my side, watching the faint glow of cameras flashing beyond the fence. For the first time since this started, the air felt lighter. The world finally saw what I was up against. But I also knew something else. People like Karen don't surrender. They regroup, and when they did, I'd be ready. Camera rolling, lights on. Truth armed and loaded. Asterisk, it happened 3 nights after the video went viral. I'd just started to believe maybe the noise had finally stopped. No machines, no trucks, no fake smiles across the fence. The air was still for the first time in weeks. Too still. Banjo knew first. He always does. A low growl rippled out of him like thunder under the floorboards. Not barking, just that deep, steady sound that means someone's out there. I muted the TV, stepped to the window, and saw movement by the trench. Flashlights, 3 of them. The beams danced across the ground, catching flashes of reflective vests. I couldn't make out faces, but I knew the way they moved slow, careful, like they didn't want to be seen. I slipped on my boots, grabbed my phone, and stepped out the side door, keeping the lights off. The air smelled like wet dirt and gasoline, the kind of night where the crickets even hold their breath. As I crept closer, I heard the scrape of metal, heavy, dull, and rhythmic. Then a thud. Concrete hitting dirt. When I reached the edge of the porch, I saw them clearly. 2 men unloading cinder blocks from the back of a pickup truck, dropping them one by one into the trench. And standing behind them, arms crossed, was Karen Martell. No clipboard this time. No scarf. Just a dark jacket and that same self-satisfied smirk. They were filling in my last open path, the narrow gap I'd used for weeks to haul in water and supplies. I started recording, flashlight off, just my camera lens catching what the moonlight gave me. Karen watched in silence, occasionally nodding toward the workers. Every few seconds, looked toward my house like she was daring me to step out. So I did. I walked down the steps, a slow, deliberate phone raised. Banjo followed, low growl rumbling again. The workers froze when they saw me. One of them dropped a block on his boot and cursed. Karen straightened, pretending she wasn't startled. "You shouldn't be out here, Evan," she said sharply. "This is a restricted work zone." "Restricted?" I said, voice calm but cold. "On my property?" She smiled, that same polished expression that never reached her eyes. "Boundary clarification is pending. In the meantime, we're ensuring safety compliance." By dumping concrete in the middle of the night, her jaw flexed. "It's temporary." I lifted my phone higher so the camera could catch her face. "Good, then you won't mind me recording it." The man nearest to her shifted uneasily. "Ma'am, maybe we should keep working," she snapped. Banjo barked once, loud and sharp. The sound echoed across the empty fields, and both men froze again. I took one step closer. "Karen," I said quietly, "you're trespassing. You're obstructing access to my well. And you're doing it on video. Do you have any idea how that's going to look tomorrow morning?" Her lips twitched, but she said nothing. "Last chance," I added. "Walk away before this turns into something you can't bury with concrete." She hesitated, then motioned for the men to stop. They exchanged glances, dropped the last block, and started loading the rest back into the truck. As they climbed in, Karen leaned closer across the trench. "You'll regret this," she said softly. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I looked her dead in the eye. "Neither do you." I held my phone steady until their taillights disappeared down the road. Only then did I let my hand shake. Banjo pressed against my leg, still tense, still growling low. I knelt beside him and whispered, "Good boy. We got it all. Inside, I transferred the footage to 3 separate drives, time-stamped it, and sent 1 copy to my lawyer, Jenna. Then I uploaded a 30-second clip to YouTube titled, HOA caught dumping concrete in trench at 2:43 a.m. It hit 10,000 views before sunrise. By the time I brewed my first cup of coffee, Channel 9 had already left a voicemail. Mr. Reed, we saw the footage. Can we come by for an interview? I stared out at the trench, my trench now lit by the first streaks of dawn. They thought they were burying my way out. Instead, they dug themselves in deeper than they could ever climb. Asterisk by the next morning. My phone was a war zone, missed calls, emails, voicemails from reporters, lawyers, and a few people pretending to be my new best friend. But the only name I cared about seeing was Jenna. She was already 3 steps ahead. I've drafted an emergency motion, she said. We're filing today. The footage you captured crosses from property dispute to criminal trespass and willful obstruction of essential infrastructure. I didn't fully understand the legal jargon, but I understood the word. Criminal. 2 days later, we were standing in front of the Tulsa County Courthouse. The trench still visible from satellite images online. The videos still spreading like wildfire. The hearing room smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. Judge Dunley, silver hair, square glasses. The kind of man who doesn't tolerate nonsense, sat behind the bench. He looked down at the papers, then up at us. This is an emergency injunction filed by Mr. Evan Reed against the Sunny Hollow Homeowners Association, he said slowly, claiming unlawful encroachment, harassment, and infrastructure sabotage. His gaze shifted toward the defense table. Ms. Martell, you're representing the HOA as president, correct? Karen Martell sat across the aisle, dressed like she was attending a photo shoot. Her perfect posture didn't hide the exhaustion behind her eyes. Beside her sat 2 lawyers in dark suits, whispering like vipers. Yes, Your Honor. She said with a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. And I believe this is all a misunderstanding. Our intention was... Jenna stood up before she could finish. Your Honor, the defendant's intention is irrelevant. We have footage, timestamps, verified boundary maps proving the HOA knowingly trespassed and attempted to obstruct my client's water access. These are not misunderstandings. They're coordinated actions. The judge raised an eyebrow. Let's see the evidence. Jenna plugged in a USB drive. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the first clip played. Karen standing beside the bulldozer, pointing at the well pump. Her voice echoed through the speakers. Make sure that trench cuts just shy of that pipe. He can't stay here without water. A low murmur rippled through the room. Karen's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. She looked straight ahead, face pale, jaw tightening with every word. Next came the second clip, the night sabotage. 2 workers dropping concrete blocks, her standing behind them, arms crossed. You could hear me off camera saying, "You're trespassing. You're obstructing my access," in her voice clear and cold. "You'll regret this." When the clip ended, silence hung heavy. Even the judge looked stunned. Jenna broke the quiet. Your Honor, we also have proof that the permits the HOA submitted to local authorities were forged. The signatory listed on those documents passed away in 2022. Additionally, HOA funds were used to pay unlicensed contractors for the excavation. Judge Dunley leaned back, eyes narrowing. Is that true, Ms. Martell? Karen's lawyers whispered urgently. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I'll take that as a yes, the judge said dryly. He set his pen down. Effective immediately, all HOA activity involving Mr. Reed's property is to cease. The trench will be backfilled within 7 days. Access to his well and driveway must be restored immediately. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the county prosecutor for investigation into fraud, forgery, and criminal harassment. Jenna allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. I didn't move. I just exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. Karen finally looked at me. No smile. No words. Just pure hatred thinly veiled behind humiliation. I met her eyes and said quietly, "Progress doesn't wait, remember?" The gavel came down hard. Court adjourned outside. The air felt different, lighter. Jenna clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied, looking toward the horizon. "We did, and it's not over yet. They still have to fill that damn trench." They came to fill the trench on a Tuesday morning. No bulldozers with HOA logos this time, just county trucks. Big and clean, their orange lights flashing in the early sun. The sound of engines still rattled the windows, but this time it didn't make my blood boil. It sounded right. Like balance being restored. I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee in one hand and Banjo sitting proudly beside me. Together, we watched as the crews rolled back the dirt, layer by layer, erasing the scar that had wrapped around my home for weeks. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. Karen didn't show. Word was, she'd resigned as HOA president 2 days after the hearing. Then the news broke that she'd been arrested. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and unlawful construction. The story hit every local channel. Her mugshot was everywhere. The same woman who once smiled like she owned the sun now looked small, tired, and cornered. The HOA board collapsed overnight. 3 members resigned. The county dissolved their authority completely and placed Sunny Hollow under trustee management. Homeowners were furious, not at me, but at her. Some sent letters apologizing. One even dropped off a homemade pie at my gate with a note. "You didn't just defend your land, you defended all of us." That one stayed pinned to my fridge a few weeks later. I got a thick envelope in the mail, the official court settlement. Compensation for property damage, legal fees, and emotional distress. It was more than enough to rebuild the fences, repave the driveway, and finally add that storm shelter I'd been meaning to build for years, but the money didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet, the kind of quiet you can feel. No bulldozers. No trucks. No letters and fancy envelopes telling me what to do with my home. Just wind in the cottonwoods, Banjo's tail thumping against the porch, and the slow hum of peace returning. A month later, I put up a new fence. Solid cedar. 10 feet tall, concrete footings, sturdy enough to outlive me. And right there, on the west side, facing what used to be Sunny Hollow, I added a small metal sign. Black letters. Simple, honest. Trench 2025. Never again. Banjo sat next to me as I tightened the last screw. He looked up, tail wagging slow, eyes calm, like he knew we'd won something bigger than a court case. I took one last sip of coffee, looked out across the open land my father once tended, and smiled. "They wanted to bury me," I said softly, "but all they did was plant my story."